Welcome to the Anti-Optimist Therapist podcast, where optimism and realism coexist. There's this idea floating around modern culture, especially on social media, that the ultimate goal is total freedom. Freedom from expectations, from rules, responsibilities, from discomfort, judgment, morality, structure, anything that might limit us. But here's the truth no one wants to admit. A life with no structure isn't freedom. It tends to be a mess. Sociologists have pointed out that in modern Western culture, there's two competing messages about morality. First one is that morality is entirely subjective. You do you. The second one is that judgment is forbidden unless you direct it at the socially approved targets. And this creates a generation that is frightened of moral clarity, yet constantly engaged in moral outrage of some sort. It's paralyzing if everything is relative because nothing feels meaningful enough to commit to. I think ACT would say this is exactly what happens when people lose contact with values. Without values, you're directionless. You're not liberated, you're unanchored. And when people lose structure, they usually drift into one of two extremes. One category could be the relativist. Who am I to say what's right? Everything is subjective. It sounds tolerant, but I think it can lead to confusion, aimlessness, and an inability to commit to anything meaningful. Then on the other hand, you have the ideologue. I know exactly who's good, who's evil, and how everyone else should live. It sounds principled, but it becomes rigid, arrogant, and morally aggressive. These are opposite answers to the same problem, the fear of choosing your own values. Neither one leads to maturity, and neither one leads to meaning, neither one leads to freedom. And ACT would say both extremes are forms of cognitive fusion. With relativism, we're fusing with the belief that nothing really matters, so no choices are required. The ideology, we're fusing with the belief that your choices are the only ones that should exist. But here's the part that I think nobody says out loud. You can live your values without lowering your standards for anyone and without needing to police or judge everyone else. Values don't require domination, and values don't require collapse. Values simply require commitment. That's the middle path the world keeps forgetting exists. And I think the ancient philosophers actually handled conflicting moral codes differently, and I would venture to say better. Socrates didn't say, well, morality is relative. Who's to say? He also didn't say, only my tribe knows the truth. He engaged, he asked questions, he searched for coherence, he sought wisdom, not power. He understood that humans are inherently moral creatures. We're always shaping systems, structures, and rituals and laws, even when we pretend we're not. Because deep down, we know instinctively we need structure to survive. That's not oppression, it's orientation. And ACT hits this dead on. Freedom isn't doing whatever you feel like all the time. That's impulsivity, not autonomy. Real freedom is choosing your structure intentionally. Values are structure, commitment is structure, responsibility is structure, discipline is structure. And they don't limit you, they free you from your own turmoil. Acceptance is structure. It's the opposite of delusion. It's saying, these are the limits, this is reality, now who do I choose to be? When you reject structure, you don't end up feeling liberated, you end up feeling overwhelmed. When you choose structure, you gain direction. Stories teach us this. Every meaningful story has boundaries, rules, trials, sacrifices, obstacles. The hero is transformed because the journey is narrow, not because it's wide open. Freedom is not the absence of difficulty, it's the willingness to face difficulty with purpose. ACT calls this committed action, taking steps toward what matters, even when it's uncomfortable. And that's the whole point. If you're living only by comfort, you're not living free. You're living trapped by whatever emotion hits you in any given moment. Values give you courage, and courage creates meaning, and meaning creates true freedom. So no, we don't necessarily need fewer rules. We need better ones, the ones we choose deliberately. The ones grounded in values, integrity, responsibility, and wisdom. The ones that orient us toward the person we want to become. And here's the thing that I think no one likes to admit. Even when you're not certain your ideals are attainable, you try to reach for them anyway, because if you're not reaching, life doesn't tend to have a direction. And without direction, meaning disappears. Freedom requires reaching. Reaching requires structure. Structure requires courage. And courage, I think that's where life actually begins. Thanks for listening to the Anti-Optimist Therapist podcast, where optimism and realism coexist.